Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming to Legal Services of the Hudson Valley. I am very, very pleased to welcome you all today to this press conference where the Attorney General, Eric Schneiderman, will be talking about two very, very important programs he created, the Homeowner Protection Program and the Mortgage Assistance Program, or as we, the advocates, call it, HOP and MAP. Many of you, not the advocates, but the press and some people may think that the foreclosure crisis is behind us in Westchester and the Hudson Valley. And nothing really could be further from the truth. In fact, in many counties in the Hudson Valley, we're really reaching the peak right now. And so the programs that the Attorney General created are critical in the Hudson Valley and throughout New York State. And we're particularly grateful to the Attorney General for creating programs that combine qualified civil legal services and qualified housing counselors, since so many clients, as we all know, really need both services. And so the HOP program and the MAP program combine those resources, and the outcomes for homeowners, for low-income homeowners, is exponentially better. I'm the CEO of Legal Services of the Hudson Valley, and we are the primary provider of free civil legal services in Westchester and the Hudson Valley. We've been a HOP provider since late in 2012, and since that time we have provided help to over 1,000 households. And these are low-income people who really have nowhere else to turn, and working with our housing counseling partners, we have been able to save so many homes, and we are so grateful to the Attorney General for really leading the charge in this front. As we know, he is the one that really started, negotiating with the banks and making sure that low-income homeowners have the resources to remain in their homes. And in places like Westchester and the Hudson Valley, this is critical, where there's no real affordable housing, and people come here. They come to the Hudson Valley. They want to own their homes. And when they lose their homes, they're displaced. They could end up homeless. Property values, go down. And communities are destabilized. And that's why we are so grateful that so many people have been helped by these programs. The Attorney General really started them, and we are so grateful that Attorney General Eric Schneiderman is continuing. He didn't just start them and walk away, but he is continuing to fund them. He's continuing the fight, and we just are very grateful, as are homeowners in Westchester and the Hudson Valley.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you very much. Thanks to Barbara Finkelstein and her colleagues for hosting us here today, and for the great work you are doing with our office's Homeowner Protection Program, the HOP, as a part of our HOP network to fight the foreclosure crisis here in the Hudson Valley. We're joined by some other great partners in this effort here today, including Westchester Residential Opportunities, the Rural Ulster Preservation Corp., and Legal Aid of Rockland County, as well as our anchor partners in managing and ensuring that the HOP network works, the Empire Justice Center and the Center for New York City Neighborhoods. Without you, we could not deliver these services. Without you, we couldn't keep people in their homes. Without you, we couldn't be helping communities all across the state of New York. And I want to acknowledge that I'm also standing with some colleagues in government who have been outstanding allies in our shared efforts to revitalize housing in the Hudson River Valley. And I want to emphasize that our programs are only as good as they are because we work with local officials and we work with people all over the state who understand the programs and send people to us. So the network of officials in this part of the state is extraordinary and has done an outstanding job in working with all of these programs that were set up by the Attorney General's office, but that operate on a collaborative basis. And we're here with Democratic Senate Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins, Assembly Member David Buchwald, and White Plains Mayor Tom Roach. I'm also joined by a Peekskill homeowner, Ms. Earlene Williams-Matthews, who will share her story later in the program. So this team of public officials and not-for-profits has produced extraordinary results for folks in the Hudson River Valley. And I want to put this in a little bit of context because we are here today because we are approaching the point sometime in the next few weeks that the HOP network will have served its 50,000th family in New York, and this is a program that only started up in late 2012. We have big ambitions, and we want to get the word out to more people because there are more people eligible for modifications that just don't know it. And that's why we do go around the state to mark this, and we continue to evolve. We continue to develop new programs to meet new needs. The context for this is that when I first got elected Attorney General, and it's easy for people to forget this, but I was January of 2011, and we were in the worst housing crisis in the history of the United States. The American homeowners lost $7.4 trillion in home equity in 2008 in the crash. That was the wealth of the middle class, and it disproportionately affected communities of color who had more of their wealth in the equity in their homes. So the housing market in New York had collapsed, and as of January 2011, because the state governments were suffering too and local governments were suffering too, there just weren't the resources to deal with it, to deal with the crisis. So I made it a priority from day one to do everything I possibly could to help homeowners get their lives back on track and to hold accountable the financial institutions whose reckless misconduct actually brought about the crash of the mortgage-backed securities market and that led to the crash of the housing market. I was the first, and for a time, the only state attorney general in the country to stand up and say I would not settle any claims with banks until there was a thorough investigation. And as a result of this, and thank you. And eventually this got up to the ear of the president, and in the State of the Union address in January 2012, they had me down in Washington as he announced that they were forming an unprecedented state-federal working group to investigate the banks that had contributed to the crash and to recover money for communities across the country that were suffering. So far, my working group has recovered well over $60 billion, and over $4 billion of that has come to New York and to New York communities. We have some of that cash has gone to the state, but other money has been used for a variety of creative programs that, quite candidly, we've worked on with the banks. I mean, we've been very, very diligent about saying, okay, we'll get some cash for the state governments, New York State and other states. We'll get some cash for federal agencies. We also want to work with you to figure out how to help the people who were hurt, how to get resources into the communities. And we have developed a multifaceted approach, and each settlement we get more and more creative, and there'll be more good things for us to announce. We are now not anywhere close to the end of this process. And ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to meeting with more of my friends in the financial services industry and to working out more settlements. But the start of this was the rude awakening I got when I took office in January 2011 and learned that 345,000 New York families were facing foreclosure, and that almost half of them had never had a chance to talk to a lawyer at any stage of the proceedings. We set up the Homeowner Protection Program, which you've heard about, which we call HOP. It's a network of legal services and housing counseling agencies all over the state. 3 years later, we now fund almost 90 agencies to help New Yorkers stay in their homes, and some of the agencies are here with us today. Again, as I mentioned, we don't know exactly when, but sometime in the next month, we're going to hit the 50,000th family to visit a HOP agency and to get the help that they provide. We hope for many more, tens of thousands of people to come through our doors, and we continue to do whatever we can do to call attention to this program. And we get excellent assistance from public officials around the state who are our partners in identifying people who need and can benefit from that help. So thousands of families have gotten their mortgages written down, gotten their rates reduced, they're staying in their homes, and as long as I'm the Attorney General, I have pledged that no one in the state of New York will lose their home because they can't get to a lawyer. And that's a pledge I intend to keep. So we started the HOP program, and then we learned that for some families, they might be eligible for modification, but there were barriers preventing them from getting there. Many families in New York were eligible, but they had a small debt or a lien or some arrears on a mortgage that made them, disqualified them from a modification they otherwise would be eligible for. This has been a bad economy. If someone loses their job or there's an unexpected illness, people can fall behind on their mortgage payments or have incur some medical debt that prevents them from getting a mortgage write-down. So we created the New York State Mortgage Assistance Program, or MAP, so that people can get through our HOP providers small loans to pay off these small debts, often very, very small debts. When they're talking, $8,000 that could prevent you from getting a major readjustment in your mortgage. The MAP loans are tacked on as essentially sort of a second mortgage, and we get these families then into programs so they can get stabilized, they can get their lives back on track. In less than a year, MAP has approved hundreds of loans across the state, totaling more than $9 million, and we expect this program just to grow. And again, we're doing everything we can do to make sure people know about it, and the more people who know about it, the more people will get an opportunity to use it, and I'm committed to making sure it receives adequate funding. We're not going to run out of money. We just need to get everybody in New York who's eligible to come in. In the Hudson River Valley alone, and this is really something that's been going on only for a matter of months, we've already awarded more than $650,000 in these small loans to help families avert foreclosure and keep their home. We encourage everyone to reach out to the folks standing with me here or to the HOP providers here. MAP loans really are helping people get past the crises that afflict far too many New Yorkers and far too many Americans. The number of people who can't handle even a very small financial emergency is staggering in the United States, but we're trying to deal with it as best we can, and in New York we have the most comprehensive program to try and address this for issues of home ownership than any other state. We also have added more recently another program that I want to mention because it's also very important. We then started to see mortgage rescue scams coming up, right? And we became concerned that instead of going to our HOP network, people were hearing ads on the radio or getting things on the internet that purported to be ways to help them get their mortgages written down or get modifications. And this is a particularly despicable sort of scam because these people are desperate, and it's essentially taking people who are victims of the misconduct in the financial markets that brought about the housing crash and making them victims again by getting them, in some cases, they get people to turn over their deeds to these companies. They take money pretending that they're lawyers who are going to get a recovery from the banks. And so I was in my car and driving, and something came on the radio that said, "The state attorneys general have settled the big claims with the banks. Your mortgage may have already been written down. Call the blah, blah, blah law firm." I think, what? That's me. So I did. So in fact, I took the number and I did call that law firm, and we then took them to court and shut down their mortgage rescue scam. But we of course realized we're not going to be able to catch everybody, so we developed something again. Nothing that's ever been done before like this, but we're like being creative. We provided a tool available through the new technology. We have a web-based app called agscamhelp.com. And what this enables any New Yorker to do is use your desktop computer or your smartphone. You can punch in the name of a mortgage assistance company or any firm that purports to be able to help you, and you will find out very, very quickly if they've been vetted either by our office and are part of the HOP network or the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. And if they're not a HUD-approved counseling agency and they're not a part of our HOP network, move on. The app also helps people get to the HOP provider closest to them. So this is something that is very new. Thousands of people have already used it, and we are promoting it with our HOP partners in any way we can. But we don't want people to miss out on mortgage modifications that they're eligible for or lose their home because they can't get to a lawyer or housing counselor or because they have a small debt that blocks them from getting a modification they would otherwise be entitled to. And we certainly don't want people to be victimized by fraudsters when we do have this incredible network, really beyond that in any other state, to help people stay in their homes and to help the communities that were hurt by the crash. So we have a hotline as well as an app, and we try to keep up with every level of technology, 855-HOME-456. We have it featured on our webpage, the Office of Attorney General webpage, and a lot of our partners, the folks standing with me and others across the state, have been very, very helpful in helping us get this information out to people. And together, the state of New York and the public officials in the state of New York have the most aggressive and comprehensive effort in the country to hold accountable the banks that contributed to the crash and to get the money from them back into the communities that were hurt and get the housing market in New York stabilized and to help our communities recover and revive. Because if you don't have, if you can't afford housing, or if you have abandoned properties around on your street, you just really can't revive a community. It holds back economic growth, it increases crime, and we're getting into the root causes of that more effectively, I believe, than anyone else. And I have to say, it's been a pleasure working with all of you in the HOP network and with all of you in public life. But the next person who's going to speak is someone who actually is a HOP client, and someone who overcame significant obstacles to getting assistance with her mortgage, where she lives, for the home where she lives with her children and grandchildren. So I want to introduce Miss Earlene Williams Matthews.
Good morning. My name is Earlene Williams Matthews, and I want to thank Attorney General Schneiderman for allowing me to share my story today. I am the mother of 4 and grandmother of 5. My 2 youngest children and 3 of my grandchildren live with me. 5 years ago, I moved to Peekskill, New York, from the Bronx, New York, seeking a better life. I found the home of my dreams in a wonderful neighborhood with fantastic neighbors. To give you an example of when we first moved into our home, I could not find the keys to the van. I searched and searched to no avail. I realized I had an extra key in my wallet. As I entered the van, I saw my keys in the ignition where they had been for 2 days. And the best part of the story, my van was still in my carport. Life was great, and then life hit me hard. I had a total hip replacement, had flooding, lost my overtime employment, and I experienced a harsh and brutal winter with exorbitant utility bills. The oil company in Con Edison was taking all that I had. I fell behind on my mortgage, and no matter how hard I tried, I could not catch up. I prayed, and I prayed. My prayers was answered when I was told about the organization called Westchester Residential Opportunities. I was drowning with an anchor around my neck when Westchester Residential Opportunities rescued me. Not only did they take the anchor from around my neck, they took me in a lifeboat, set me on solid ground by giving me financial counseling and keeping me from having my home go into foreclosure. They told me about the MAP program. The skills that Westchester Residential Opportunities gave me will last me a lifetime, allowing me to never look back and to move forward positively as a homeowner. I truly want to thank the staff of Westchester Residential Opportunities for being the answer to my prayers, as well as thank Attorney General Schneiderman for making sure that other families like mine can have their prayers answered with access to life-saving programs. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So our goal is that everyone, like Earlene, has their prayers answered, and if people need help, they should know that help is available, and we're working very hard to make sure that every New Yorker who's eligible for help gets it. And I'm now very, very proud to bring up someone who is an extraordinary public servant, a longtime colleague and friend of mine, the State Senate Democratic leader, Andrea Stewart-Cousins.
Good morning. It's really good to be here with my good friend and former colleague. You did pretty good for yourself. The Attorney General, as well as my colleagues in government, Mayor Roach and Assemblymember Buchwald, and to hear your story, Ms. Williams. I have to say that as an elected official, many of you in the room have heard from my office on every level asking you how we can help the scores of people who show up desperate to keep their homes. And the reality is that we try and get enough funding for everyone on every level of government to make something make sense so that people will indeed be able to stay in their homes. Because if you don't have a roof over your head, which is the basis for everything else, that you are trying to do, whether it's employment or education, raising your family, then it becomes an extremely difficult task. And trying to just cobble together little bits of funding was really all that most of us could do, until this Attorney General, who decided that we who are trying to help our constituents through these terrible, terrible times, many through no fault of their own, needed a champion. And that's what the Attorney General did. He decided he would be that champion, and as he said, challenged the banks to do the right things, went national, and when he went national, he didn't get too big for us, but he brought money back to the state, so that instead of limping along in doing this critical work, we had actual money to fund so many organizations and advocates such as Legal Services, our host, and WRO, who I don't want to get into trouble with not naming everyone, but I can tell you, to have money available to really help people makes all the difference. So frankly, I want to thank you for being our champion home nationally, making sure that you set a bar that other people are trying to reach. And then when the money comes back, really helping with the legislature and, of course, the governor to fight to make sure that that money goes to actually helping people who were hurt. One of the saddest days that I had as an elected official was being at an affair. It was actually a fair, and a couple came up to me and they handed me an envelope and they said, "Please don't open this now. When you get, to some private place, open it." And what it was a letter explaining to me how they were losing their home, how they had a business, and they had mortgaged the business, and now they were losing their home and the business. And they'd let it go so long that they didn't know what to do. By the time my office intervened and got them sort of directed, it was way, way too late. And they were embarrassed. They didn't want anybody to know that they were in this situation. At this stage, I hope there's nobody who's too embarrassed to ask for help. The worst thing is that if you get over the embarrassment and you ask for help, and there is none. What has happened here is not only do we understand that it was a national problem and you have no reason to be embarrassed, but there are programs in place and people who will help you. You can avoid scams. You can pay that little piece, that you need in order to get the modification. And if the modification isn't going the way it should, you have advocates. Certainly the Attorney General, people in the state legislature, the governor's office, and the people here. Don't be embarrassed. Don't lose your home. And be happy that we have champions such as Attorney General Schneiderman. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And now another tremendous advocate for his constituents and his community, Assemblyman David Buchwald.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for being here this morning. I'm very pleased to join with Attorney General Schneiderman and with the advocates, including our host, Legal Services of the Hudson Valley, on this essential issue. It is essential to the families who are affected, and is essential to the fabric of our communities. This past year, there were over 2,300 foreclosures in Westchester County alone. That means 2,300 families and their neighbors being affected, and the core sense of ability of people to provide for themselves. And that is something that goes to what it means to have a community here in Westchester where we can rely on the stability of our housing stock and the ability of people to work on their education, their jobs, and everything else that you rely on your home as the foundation for. This is a problem that is not going to go away unless we constantly bring attention to it, as the Attorney General has. And his leadership on this issue has proven essential to so many. And it is my real pleasure to be here today. I know from my experience at the local level when I was on the White Plains Common Council that by the time a family has been forced to move out of their home, and banks far too often then neglect the property, let it lay fallow and abandoned, that affects the entire block, the entire neighborhood. We can't let things get to that point. And it's not just an issue in the urban centers of our communities. I also represent some of the smaller towns here in Westchester, in northern Westchester. And on a per capita basis, they have some of the highest rates of foreclosure. So this is something that should bring us all together, united behind the great work that our advocate organizations do and the leadership of Attorney General Schneiderman. I want to thank him again for making sure that so many New Yorkers and frankly Americans across this country are able to stay in their homes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and a couple of important points my colleagues have made. It really is an inhibiting factor for a lot of people that they feel embarrassed about this. And it's important, if you have a neighbor, you have a family member, you know someone who's got a problem, urge them to get in touch. Go on with the website, get in touch with the HOP network. And this is true, as the Assemblyman was saying, in every community. It's not a problem that's limited to cities or to rural areas. It's a problem all across New York. And it's not a problem that is limited only to the poorest of the poor. This is a problem for some families we think of as middle-class families. And here in White Plains, you have a tremendous advocate for this community and someone who is also, in a way, our host here today, and I'm glad to bring him up now to close things out, the great Mayor of White Plains, Tom Roach.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. And we're very fortunate to have Attorney General Schneiderman representing all of us in our state. When that foreclosure crisis began, it looked like it was like a tidal wave, and people looked at it and you thought, well, how can this ever be fixed? Tough to actually try and get involved in something like which he did. And what many people don't realize is how many layers there are when a home goes into foreclosure. There is the impact, the human impact on the family involved. What about the children? The most basic need in life is housing, and to have instability in housing impacts a child's success in school, which impacts their success in life. The other aspect away from that is the impact on the community. We had this wonderful discussion this morning, and Arlene mentioned what wonderful neighbors she has. I bet her neighbors think they have a wonderful neighbor in her. They would not want to lose her, certainly not to a vacant home. And I think that has an impact, as Assemblyman Buchwald noted. And I can give you, aside from the practical side, as being a mayor, we get the phone call that says, there's a house in my neighborhood, they're not cutting the grass, and it's an empty house. So, okay. You can go online to Google and find out what happened to that kid from kindergarten that you were wondering about, just because, like that, right? Try finding out who actually is responsible for that home. And we're not talking about it today, but A.G. Schneiderman has been at the forefront of the zombie house issue, which is a problem. What winds up happening is we can't get, if you find someone you think is responsible, you can't get them on the phone. So we wind up in White Plains, we hire contractors to maintain the property, but then you get the phone call, we think someone's living in it. So now the building department has to go out, and the police department. And these are resources that are better spent elsewhere. And my mother always used to say, and I'm sure everyone's mother used to say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It's an old saying for a reason. In almost everything in life, that's true. And here's the ounce of prevention. We learned today from A.G. Schneiderman the power of radio advertising. It probably won't be in their book that they give to the potential advertisers, but it's important to get the word out. What we're doing here today, the fact that he's taking the time from his busy schedule to put this out there, because part of this is embarrassment and part of this is not knowing that this safety net exists, that these resources exist, that these rights exist. We all benefit when someone stays in their home because it is, as hard as it is to navigate the foreclosure end of things, it is much harder when someone loses their home and now that's a much harder problem to be involved in. So thank you for your efforts in this regard. I want to thank WRO, who we work with regularly in our city, and Legal Services of the Hudson Valley, who is so crucial in doing this work. So it's my pleasure to have been here today, and I'm very pleased to work with all our partners to help the people of our state.
So, thank you, Your Honor. I'm very pleased that we're about to hit 50,000 families that have received help across the state of New York. Our goal is to serve many, many more. We have settled with 3 banks, and I want to note these are national settlements. I'm the only state official who has a seat at the table, just because I was fairly belligerent about getting this set up in the first place, and Andrea, people who actually know me from the state senate understand how I can be. Yes, no, there wasn't a word for it when I got there, but I was a disruptor. So we have a seat at the table, but I do want to say that the 3 banks that have settled, J.P. Morgan Chase, Citibank, and Bank of America, largest settlements in American history, by the way. Bank of America, $16.7 billion nationally. They all are working with us now, and we end each settlement with the ability to provide particular assistance to anyone who has a mortgage with that bank. But as the mayor pointed out, a lot of the mortgages are being sold in a secondary market, and it can be very challenging. So I look forward to working with all of you in the upcoming legislative session to pass our zombie foreclosure bill to deal with these abandoned properties where foreclosure has been begun but not completed, and the people have abandoned the property. We can address this problem. And the only obstacle are resources and creativity. And with my colleagues in government, we've got the creativity to try and address all of these problems and identifying new ones as they come up and coming up with creative solutions. And I assure you that there are other institutions that will continue to provide us with the resources to solve these problems. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you. I also want to mention that we're joined today by the head of my Westchester Regional Office, Gary Brown, who many of you know. And in addition to my main offices in New York City and Albany, I have 13 other regional offices. And this is truly a statewide effort. But the folks in this part of the state have done just an extraordinary job. And you are seeing lots of people and helping lots of people. And I look forward to this partnership continuing as long as I am your Attorney General. And with that, Eric will take questions if you'll just tell him who you are.
We'll start with on-topic questions. Please just say your name and your outlet.
Hi there, I'm Christina Chiarelli with Milestone News. I was just wondering, how easy or difficult was it to get these banks on board?
Well, the process started when I took office. There was a deal on the table that would have taken the 5 biggest banks were about to settle with all of the state AGs and the federal government for a deal that was a couple $1 billion and writing down $20 billion worth of mortgages they would have had to write down anyway. I refused to sign on to the deal. And sadly, my strongest supporter among the AGs was Beau Biden, the AG of Delaware, who just passed away, Joe Biden's son. But he and I then alone were trying to break up this deal. And we, when people heard about the deal, learned about the deal, housing activists, we got a lot of support from the civil rights community. A lot of people do not realize that the impact on the African American community was twice as bad in terms of household wealth as on white communities because of this massive effort to increase black home ownership right up until the crash. So we had support from the civil rights community, and eventually we got the ear of the president, and they turned it around. They set up the working group. And then we started investigating the banks. And this was not that complicated a case. These are not that complicated cases. They're big cases. But they were just, buying mortgages that shouldn't have been given to people, creating the incentive for companies like Countrywide to give more mortgages to people who clearly couldn't afford them, and bundling them into securities and selling them. And since they didn't keep them on their books, they weren't worried if the mortgage would fail eventually and the people would face foreclosure. So once we identified this and subpoenaed a bunch of their emails and got them to the table, it was easy to get them on board. Negotiating the final cost took some work, but everyone recognizes what happened, and other institutions know that this is coming, and we're not doing anything they can't afford. And I assure you that my focus is to continue to move forward to help the recovery nationally, but I have a special focus on the people of the state of New York and the communities that were devastated by the crash. And I assure you I will be doing everything I can do, as long as I'm co-chairing that working group, to make sure that we move forward. And I look forward to announcing other settlements in the months and years to come.
Any more on-topic questions? Okay, off-topic, we have time for a couple.
I have one off topic. I'm Miss Ray from Westchester. If you can talk a little bit about your role as special prosecutor in the death variant Mount Vernon, what your investigation will entail, and what is your response to community activists and mentors and methods?
This is my first case as special prosecutor. I think I called for the creation of a special prosecutor's office back in December, and with the support of some of my colleagues, very simply for the reason that there was a strong public perception that local district attorneys, it was unfair to ask them to investigate and prosecute the police officers that they work with every day to make their cases in a case as serious as homicide, or when there's a death of a civilian, an unarmed civilian, after an encounter with a police officer, law enforcement officer in the state of New York. Under the order, I supersede the local district attorney, as we've done in this case, and I've set up a special investigation and prosecutions unit. It is composed of extraordinary attorneys, former prosecutors. We have investigators who work in our office, many former police officers and people with a lot of expertise in all sorts of areas. And we have superseded this. We have a very dedicated team, and we are now proceeding with what I can assure the public, and I think at the end of it, I look forward to there being public affirmation of the fact that this is going to be an impartial, completely thorough, and independent investigation and review of what happened. We will probably issue a report outlining what happened and calling attention to either structural problems or issues related to individual cases of misconduct. But we're going to follow the facts wherever they lead. And in ongoing investigations, it's often frustrating because no prosecutor can talk about an ongoing investigation, so we can't comment on the specifics, but it is underway. We've gotten good cooperation from all of our colleagues in local government, including the police department, the Westchester District Attorney, and we're moving ahead. So I can't say I can't comment on the specific facts or prejudge anything, but I can promise that we will follow the facts wherever they lead.
Anything else?
Actually, I have one more. You could talk a little bit about the refinance program.
Sure. We have, my Civil Rights Bureau determined pretty quickly after I came into office that there were many, many public agencies across the state of New York, including boards of elections, police departments, that were not providing services to limited English speaking New Yorkers, and that we have well over 2 million people whose English is not good enough for them to navigate the challenging process for anybody to get up and vote in an election, or to go report a crime to the police, or to get into a hospital emergency room and, have someone there who can understand you. So we started this program, and today we announced that the Yonkers Police Department is the latest of many, many state agencies to enter into a settlement with us, agreeing to ensure that materials are made available in English and Spanish, and that anyone who needs their services can get access to those services in both English and Spanish. So this has been an ongoing effort. We have an extremely diverse state, and the number of our Spanish-speaking residents is only increasing. I mean, you can see in Westchester how dramatic this has been in the last decade or so. And we're very pleased that they entered into this agreement, and we're working this out with agencies all across the state of New York, and we're very pleased that the Yonkers Police Department has agreed to do this. It's a tremendous benefit to the people of Yonkers.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.